I'm a climatologist at the University of Southern Queensland. I work with the grazing industry across Northern Australia on the Northern Australia Climate Program. We're mainly funded by Meat and Livestock Australia, which is why we focus on the grazing community, though lots of our folks also have crops or other things that they do. So I work all across Queensland, Northern Territory, and Northern Western Australia, delivering workshops and seminars and things like that about understanding the forecast and where to find that information and hopefully how to use it. So today I'm going to talk about the current forecast because that's what most people are interested in. So as I don't know if you guys have downloaded the thing in the chat, but essentially it's a climate calendar that John McLaughlin came up with. I don't know if anybody knows John. Some of you definitely would. But so I kind of had this fiddly calendar that didn't really work very well. And then John had this great idea to put in hyperlinks for each month. And it's really easy to use. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and we can take a look at that for the month of October. I'm not going to talk a huge amount about the actual climate drivers and the things behind this forecast. I'll mention them, but it's not, this isn't really like a climate workshop or anything. It's more just, here's the forecast and here's why, and how you can leave this workshop and go away. And if you're interested in knowing kind of what's the forecast is saying, you can use this calendar even after we leave today. So this one is specifically for the Gulf region. So it's reflected in the fact that not a lot happens over winter and that it starts to get a bit more exciting in sort of September. So you can see that we have the 12 months starting in May. I'm looking at another screen. And we have sort of the must watch. So each month, those are things that you should click on to check out. Those are the interesting ones. If you have a couple extra minutes, you can look at the ones that are under good to watch. And then, of course, there's things to remember over here, which is things to remember. So what I would suggest doing is, figure out a date each month. Usually I recommend sort of around the 10th, sometime between sort of the 7th and the 14th, because that's when all of the forecasts will have been updated for that month. They're not all released during that first week. So get your notebook. This is what I do anyway. And for each one of these things that we click on, we'll write down what it is. So let's go through the month of October. And we can see under must watch, we have ENSO watch outlook. So I would write in my notebook, ENSO. And so we click on ENSO watch outlook, and it takes us directly to the BALM page that tells us what's going on with ENSO. So ENSO is the El Nino Southern Oscillation. Currently, we can see it's in La Nina phase. For anybody who doesn't know what that means, it tells us right here, the La Nina increases the chance of above average rainfall. So in my notebook, I would write down ENSO, La Nina, and then I would maybe put in brackets wet, just to kind of remind me what it means. Cool.
Yeah.
Okay, so when I clicked, it went directly to this screen. Thanks for letting me know that. And we can see it says La Nina, and then the second sentence tells me what that means. For people who are super into this stuff, you can also click on Pacific Ocean, and here's the forecast for La Nina and get a whole bunch more information. We're not going to go into that today, again, just because this is a pretty quick and dirty. So once I've written down ENSO La Nina wet, I'm going to go back to my spreadsheet here, PDF here, and click on the second one. So we're still at October, and now we're looking at BALM 3-month rainfall. Cool. So we click on that, and again, it automatically takes us to this rainfall forecast. So this one, so interestingly enough, there are a few different ways to look at the rainfall forecast on the BALM website. This one takes us to chance of above median. There's also chance of extremes, chance of at least, 3-day totals. So you have a few different options over here. If you don't like the chance of exceeding median, for today, we're just going to look at that one and discuss what that means. So we wanted to look, so across the top here, we have different time frames as well. We have 1 week, 2 weeks, 1 month, and 3 months. I don't use the 1 week one because the weather forecast is better. So the weather forecast, so like the next 7 to 10 days, comes out of a different system than these forecasts. So these forecasts come out of our seasonal system, which is sort of anything beyond the next 7 days. But the weather model that generates the weather forecast is better for the next 7 days than the climate model, just to let you know. So I usually look at, 2 week if that's my time frame that I want, but in this case, we're interested in the next 3 months. So we click on 3 months and we see we have 2 options. In this case, we're going to go November to January. So in my notebook, but below ENSO, I'm going to write BOM November to January, or N to J or something. And we're going to click on this little search icon, and there we go. Okay, we'll look at Coranda. This one's for you, Marcus. So it thinks it's a little bit slow, this website, but eventually it pops up this really helpful dialog box. So the first thing that we need to know to understand a chance of exceeding median rainfall forecast is, what is our median rainfall? Because in some places, especially over winter, the median rainfall is 0. So even if it looks all pretty and blue and colorful, it doesn't mean anything. So always keep that in mind when you're looking at this forecast. It can be misleading. But fortunately, when we type in our location here using this little thing, and here we have Coranda, it actually tells us. So we can see historical median for Coranda is 548 mils between November to January. Now, there are a couple of caveats here. We don't know when between November and January that rain will fall. It could all fall in the first week of November. Unlikely, but it could. Or it could all fall on the last day of January. Again, unlikely, but it could. So this forecast isn't for like, when exactly am I going to get rain where? This is like a vibe. Okay, just keep that in mind. So the next thing that this forecast provides, which is actually really helpful, it tells us, is it likely to be unusually dry? So that means less than 363 mils. No, there's only a 2% chance of that, so not really. Are we likely to exceed median? Yes, there's a 75% chance. Okay, cool. Is it likely to be unusually wet? So greater than 894 mils. And it says there's a 45% chance. Now, most people will say, well, that's less than 50-50, so probably not. However, if we look at this graph below, sorry, I'll try to explain this quickly. It divides actually the rainfall record up into 5 equal bins. So if you had 100 years of rainfall data and you aligned it from lowest to highest in value, and then divided that into 5. So the lowest 20 years would be deciles 1 and 2. The highest rainfall that you've had in 100 years, the top 20 years would be in deciles 9 and 10. That's pretty much how we read that. But because now we've divided our 100 years of data into 5 different boxes, that means that there's a 20% chance of being in any box, because 100 divided by 5 is 20. So actually a 45% chance of being in that top decile is twice the normal likelihood. And we can see that because of this dotted line here, that's actually twice the amount. So interestingly enough, this is saying that there's kind of an unusually high chance to get more than almost 900 mils. So sorry, Marcus. But you're definitely quite likely to get more than your median. So that's how we can use this little box to get a lot of information. Okay, so in our notebook, we've written down ENSO is in La Nina. We know November to January is likely to exceed median, potentially even unusually wet. And so now we'll go to our next thing. So this is ECMWF. That's the European Center for Medium Range Weather Forecasting. And it's just another forecast like the BOMs, but I like to check more than one just to make sure that they're all saying the same thing. Let's see if this one's been updated. Good. Cool. I haven't actually seen this yet. Wow, it's backed off a lot since the last one. It used to be all green a couple months ago. So it's really backed off. Interestingly enough, not for up there. But so this is the same thing, probability of precipitation greater than the median for November, December, January, and it shows, let's say, a 70 to 80% chance of exceeding the median. Okay, so now in our little notebook below the BOM forecast, we're going to write ECMWF, likely to exceed median or wet, whatever you want to put down. This doesn't tell us anything about what the median actually is, so we need to get that from the BALM website first. Okay, back to our thing. If you're really keen, you can actually, the UK Met Office forecast is just one more forecast. If you're not so keen, you can just go with BALM and ECMWF. Those are the two best ones. So this one actually hasn't been updated yet for October. So you can see the only month I can select here is September. And then I just dropped down the menu, selected precipitation. And then for category, we want 2 categories, which is just our chance of exceeding median. And we want Australia. There we go. And so this is our probability of above median precipitation, October, November, December. Ooh, now we're looking at November, December, January. So we can change that. There we go. Okay. Probability of whatever, November, December, January. And it's showing either 60 to 80 or 80 to 100% chance. So I'd just say UK Met Office, likely it to exceed median. It kind of doesn't matter if you're in the dark blue or the lighter blue, because they're kind of both in that area. So again, this is a vibe. We don't want to be like, oh, where exactly am I on that? It doesn't matter. It's a vibe. And so this forecast is essentially saying what the other two are saying as well. So we're like, okay, that's cool. We're going to go with that. So now we have, before we go on, I'm just going to click this IOD watch. So on your notebook, you'd write down IOD, and it takes us to the BALM website, and it says a negative Indian Ocean dipole is underway. Okay, so next to IOD, we write negative. And here it says a negative IOD increases the chances of above average spring rainfall for most of Eastern Australia. Cool. Okay, so now we know that the ENSO is in La Nina, which is a wet phase. We know the IOD is in negative, which is also a wet phase. And we have 3 forecasts showing us that it's likely to exceed median precipitation for November to January. And so in essentially, I mean, it took us a bit longer, but in kind of 5 minutes, you have a really good idea of what's happening for the next 3 months. And then you can kind of walk away and just keep in the back of your mind, like, this is the vibe. It's a wet vibe. There's likely to be extra rain, and we know it's because of this La Nina and because of the Indian Ocean dipole. If the La Nina was neutral and there was nothing going on with the Indian Ocean dipole, I'd be a bit like, what's kind of behind these forecasts? You know, if it was really unusually wet or unusually dry, but there was no major driver, I'd be a little bit more suspect. But because the drivers, so the La Nina and the Indian Ocean dipole, those are the drivers, they're having a wet signal and it's showing up in the forecast, so it all makes sense. So that's kind of how we can use that for a quick and dirty way to get the forecast each month. We also have this likely terciles for pasture growth. I don't know if this is terribly helpful for your region, but so for October to December, it's showing some areas are going to be at the bottom. I suspect that's nitrogen limited already. Anybody have any thoughts on that? Because then there's some areas that are going to be in the top, but then a lot of areas that are in red. So I don't know if it's I don't know what's driving that. I know for me, so I'm down here on the sunny coast and we're in red, and I suspect that's nitrogen deficiency because we have had waterlogged pastures for 12 months. Nah, 9 months.
I think, Chelsea, I mean, we don't usually expect a lot of rain before December.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I don't know unless it's different up there on the Cape. But this would be relative to every other time of the same time period for every year, wouldn't it?
Yep, that's right.
Yeah, I don't know why.
Yeah. Anyway, something to keep in mind. But you know, if you were out here, I guess that's still further south than Isa, but you know, this area is quite generally blue, so you'd be pretty happy there. Or through the downs here, the Darling Downs, they're probably pretty happy because they've had a full recharge of their soils, which they haven't had for a while. So that's probably why they're kind of in that top percentage. But so there's also a lot of information about pasture growth that you can click on if that's your scene. So Yep. And then we also have our temperature outlooks here in the, if you're into temperature. And that takes us straight to the BALM website again, and we can choose maximum or minimum temperatures. And it's the same as it was for the rainfall. So we have a few different options: chance of above median, chance of extremes, difference from average, which we don't have for the rainfall. This chance of extremes one is pretty fun. Oh, that's interesting. All right. So November is likely to be unusually cool. What about unusually warm? Maybe just up by Cooktown. Yeah, right. Look at that. You're gonna have a little heat wave coming through in the next week further north. But yeah, so look, temperatures are a bit funny though, because this chance of exceeding median, I find once you go to the 3-month one, it kind of just all comes out in the wash, because average temperatures, like, they don't fluctuate that much. So it's, I don't know. I find temperatures are better at 7-day, but if you kind of want a vibe about what's going on, it's showing southeast is going to be a little bit cooler than normal, and for the rest of the area, sort of normal or slightly warm. So nothing too exciting. And that's it. We do have, I will show just a couple others that pop up later in the year. So in November, we get this MJO position and forecast. That's the Madden-Julian oscillation. So once the monsoon kicks in, the Madden-Julian oscillation can control those periods of really wet conditions. Like, it can bring in a bunch of rain, or it can also kind of influence drier conditions. And that's, so when we click on that, it brings us to the MJO forecast. There are two ways that the MJO forecast is shown. There's this little animation here, which I'll show in a second. And then there's this one. It's up to you which one you want to use. But unless you've attended a climate workshop or know about this stuff, I would just do the animation. So the blue indicates cloudiness or potential like rainfall, and the brown colors indicate sunniness. Sunniness? I don't know. It's a technical term, sunniness. And so we can see that there is a bit of cloud coming over, and then it dries out. So into November. Let's try that again. Yep, so there's a bit of, this is in the next week or so, and then it fades out. And we see that reflected here. This is essentially saying this black line here is essentially saying that it's going to be, the MJO is going to be active over our region. So area 5 and 6 from sort of the 10th to the 15th of October. So there, if there was a chance of rain between the 10th and the 15th of October, it could be related to that. Yeah, so this rain band here across the top, that could be related to that MJO that's going to pass over, potentially. Yeah, and then the final one, which is also later in the season, is the burst forecast, which is essentially, are you likely to receive significant rainfall in the next sort of 1 to 4 week time period? And we can click on that. It takes us straight there. I don't know if anybody remembers me talking about this one before. It's one that actually was developed specifically by a researcher with the Northern Australia Climate Program. He visited some producers up after the floods in 2019, sort of in the Richmond-Julia Creek area. And they said, look, we don't actually care if we're going to get 2 mils. We want to know if we're going to get 15 or 20 or 40 or whatever. So he actually developed this forecast, and it tells you the chance of getting 15, 25, 50, or 75 mils within 3 consecutive days. And then we have different time frames. So it would be within 3 consecutive days between the 10th and the 16th, 3 consecutive days between the 17th and the 23rd, and so on and so forth. So if we look at this forecast for the 10th to 23rd October, we see quite a lot of places have a pretty good chance. So especially along the coast in Brisbane, sort of a 80% chance of getting at least 15 mils within 3 consecutive days. To find out which 3 consecutive days, then you'd move to your weather forecast once that's available. But this is, again, it's saying that there's something about to happen in the next couple of weeks. And we don't have a weather forecast this far out. So this forecast sort of fills in that gap. Is it going to be more than 50? Oh, for you guys, it might. anyway, there you go. Maybe don't plan any picnics. Oh, Mariba, you can go out to Mariba, but along the coast, maybe not. Yeah, so that's how we use that forecast. And that's, oh, is poor Innisfail just gonna cop it again? Oh, they always get it, don't they? Yeah. That's it for me. That's kind of what I wanted to show. So it's just this climate calendar. Again, if you have a little notebook and you just write it down, you have a really good idea within 5 minutes as you're drinking your cup of coffee of what's likely to come. And seasonal forecasts you don't look at every week. They don't change that much, and if they do change that much, it's likely just fuzz. It's more of a vibe.